It's played out in a lot of ways. I think it was probably the best educational experience when I think about like grad school and different, experiences of grad school. Being in an environment that's predominantly women really shaped my education, actually in ways that I didn't entirely, I think, understand until I was teaching undergrad students in a co-ed setting, and really saw some of the distinctions and almost a kind of college culture, and I'm sure some of it's like small liberal arts school, big research university, but just things that parts of college culture I wasn't even aware of. And I guess, some of my most enduring relationships are from that time in my life. And in terms of the research that I just did, it's interesting. I was speaking with people in girls' detention facilities, so while people have a lot of gender identities and expressions, they're in a setting that's designated as being for girls or for women. And so I thought about that a lot as I was doing the research, having gone to a school that was also, designated as being for girls or women. Oh my God.
How did that go?
It's so funny, before when I was saying there are things about academia that sometimes felt like they contradicted the work I was trying to do. I actually expected IRB to be one of the hardest parts, and it went quite smoothly for me. I think it had largely to do with the particular person who was reviewing my work and who had some social work background and was really interested in what I was doing and thought it was important. And so she really, advocated and helped me shepherd the application through the IRB process. I think it would have been way slower and more challenging if two things were the case. One, if I were interviewing people who were under 18, and two, if I were actually interviewing people who were in detention. I also think if I were interviewing people who were in detention, I would have heard really different things than what I did. I think that people would not have trusted me as much. I think that they would have been much more apprehensive about sharing some of the things that happened to them in detention, because it's really a culture of retaliation. Unfortunately, I heard some horrific stories about different kinds of physical and sexual violence in detention, that when people made efforts to report it, it kind of made their situation worse. So. Yeah, I think that we're not really socialized to have those conversations in a lot of contexts, and so it can be a little bit awkward, but I was so used to doing it from being a practitioner and also from being an activist and feeling like that's something I'm always, having conversations about. And so I did name it, and sometimes people are like, whoa, like, I can't believe we're talking about this. But I felt like it was important, and I also felt like in some ways it created more intimacy. So I kind of just did it. So there was one interview, it was actually my first interview, and it was with a trans-identified woman who had had a really bad experience in detention with a lesbian, actually, who was her cellmate. And she was telling me the story and, was kind of apologizing in a way for not what happened, but she's like, I'm sorry, like, I know a lot of good gay women. And I was like, it's really okay, this is the fact that you're trusting me with this information, which I know it's hard for you to say to me, is an honor. And I think that was probably one of the more actually intense interactions, because it was such a horrible story and a horrible experience, and also because of the unique aspects of our identity that were coming into play in that conversation. Did you say what was my training? My training was actually here in a lot of ways. So I did, so there were not a lot of offerings in my own department, social work, and around interpretive or qualitative methods, and definitely not oral history specifically. I took a lot of courses in women, gender, and sexuality studies, and I found more of a home there. But my, I think, 4th year in the program, I attended the Summer Institute, and that's where I really got into oral history. And I think that was the first time I learned about life history interviewing, I think actually from Dorinda Welly, who also has done research with LGBTQ youth. And that was like a breath of fresh air. And also the fact that it's not specific to any one discipline, I think makes it a little bit of a liberating space. I think within my department, I definitely had to defend qualitative methods more generally. Social work, although it seems really contradictory, is still really quantitatively driven when it comes to research. And I happen to be in a program that is especially quantitatively driven, and I don't think I realized just how much that was true, or what the consequences or pressures were once you're there and you decide, or you continue to do what you said you wanted to do. But I felt much more like within my department I was having to kind of explain to some people what I was doing. My committee was really supportive, and I'm super grateful for that, but there were definitely people who just didn't think of it as credible research. I think because I had heard a lot of the stories once already, and I felt like nothing could be more powerful than using those stories to advocate for change in policy practice. I think that numbers have their place and their worth, and there are actually a lot of numbers right now floating around that are really useful about overrepresentation of LGBTQ youth and racial disproportionality in child welfare systems. But I think to get at the trajectories of what's happening for young people, to really look at things like the school to prison pipeline, to look at the nuances of identity, you just can't do that with a survey, and I think if I were going into a new community and not back to a place where I'd already worked, I wonder if I would have felt as, I can only call it stubborn, as I was about using this particular method. I think in a way I might have, because it is really also about who I am as a person. But I just really felt like the stats for this community needed to be supplemented with youth voice and personal stories.